Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bay Area Content Marketing Meetup. We're here to talk about content repurposing through PR. We're joined by Michelle Garrett. Michelle is a PR expert and the author of a recently published book. The book is titled B2B PR That Gets Results, A Guide to Simple and Targeted Public Relations Practices. Michelle is going to give an overview of how you can leverage an earned media approach to get more attention from your owned media, in other words, your content. Let's see, let me share the slides, and then Michelle, you can take it away once you see the slides. Here we go.
Great. Thank you so much for having me today.
1 second, let me get to the slides. Oh my God, what's going on? Screen.
Isn't it crazy?
I'm pretty sure I can share. I'm just looking for looking for the
I
slides.
can talk to this
Okay,
topic
yeah,
about the
Michelle,
slides.
why don't you introduce yourself as I pull up the slides?
Well, so today we are talking about how to take your own media and turn it into earned media. So basically taking your content using a PR approach and getting more out of your content. So it's not just collecting dust on your website. And I do talk about this in the book. And I wanted to pick a topic that would be relevant to this group. And this is one of the things that I actually spend a lot of time working with clients on. And we're just going to talk through a few points about it. And then I'm happy to answer any questions about this or any other PR questions you may have. You may go to the next slide, please. So I think Dennis gave a quick overview. We're going to talk about the pieces of content that would make the best candidates to be pitched as earned media because they're not all great candidates for that type of approach. We'll talk about how to reach out to publications to pitch the content. And we'll talk about what to do after you have secured the earned media coverage. Next. I like to start with a little kind of a level set here so we're all on the same page about the terminology. This is the PESO model developed by Jenny Dietrich of Spin Sucks. She's very gracious about allowing people to use it with proper credit, and so this is all hers, and I do use it a lot because it helps me help clients visualize what we're talking about here. So we're really talking about taking your own media, your content, um, and turning it into earned media through PR or media relations. And then you could also use shared media, which that's where social media falls, to share it. And then you could even pay to boost it if you so chose to do so. So I think this is just a good way to think about it and look at it. And we'll touch on all of these, but we're going to focus primarily on the owned and earned media today. Next. So let's think and talk a minute about what types of content make the best candidates to pitch as earned media pieces. Next. And not just any content works. And this is sometimes disheartening because sometimes I'll talk about this and someone will come up to me afterward and say, hey, we really want to do this. We want to try this. And sometimes it's hard to explain to them that, we take a look at their content and say, well, this might not be the exact kind of content that we're thinking about. So the kind of content that works best is content that is not salesy, that does not sound like everyone else's content, and that has something in there, some meat or data or statistics or something to back it up. Go to the next slide. So AI generated content won't work. Bad news if that's what you're trying to do. You want your content to stand out and be something that they couldn't just get anywhere, because an editor, if you send them a piece of AI generated content, they know. And of course, they can get that anywhere, they can do that themselves. So we don't want to use that kind of content. Next. So let's talk about the content that works the best. And here are a few of my favorite types of content to help clients pitch as earned media. So thought leadership, customer stories or case studies, trend pieces, especially when we're talking about getting toward the end of the year, we're talking about trends coming up in the new year. That's a great time for that kind of a pitch. And then if you do your own original research and you have data that you can package up and pitch. Next. let's look at a few examples. These are all clients that I've worked with. These are real world examples of things that I have helped clients promote that would have otherwise maybe just sat on their websites. And of course, a few people would see it, but maybe not as many. So that's kind of the idea behind all of this. The first one is the Lean Maker Academy by a company called FlexPipe in the manufacturing space. Please go to the next slide. We're talking about launching their series of videos, which were developed and they produced those and they published them on their site. And they really wanted to launch this as an actual program that people could complete. It was free, but you got a certificate and so forth. So they had published it on their site, and then I helped them with the PR part of it by writing a press release, researching relevant media, and then pitching it to place the content. And we'll go to the next slide and we'll see an example, a few examples of some of the content we got. And these publications might not mean much to everyone, but these are their primary target publications. This is where their audience is spending time, their industry trade publications, as you can see. And we'll go to the next slide. We got 9 industry publications to publish the news about the Lean Maker Academy. They exceeded their sign-up goal by 50%. And this is an example of taking your own media, which in this case is videos that they produced, turning it into earned media. And then, of course, they can share it on social, they can pay to boost, and so forth. Next, please. The next example is a client in the technology space called Secure Data Recovery. They have a lab where they help you recover if your hard drive fails, for example, they help you recover your data. We can go to the next slide. They did some research on failed hard drives in their lab, and they put together a report, which they published in their blog. And they wanted that to get a little bit more attention because obviously, they're promoting it on social, maybe putting it in their newsletter, but they wanted even more people to see it. So they thought about trying PR. Go to the next slide, please. We were able to get it in some pretty recognizable publications. You'll see PC World, Network World, Ars Technica, and all in all, if we go to the next slide, I think we got 12 publications to publish the report, and a lot of people saw it that wouldn't have otherwise seen it. And this is another example of something that probably wouldn't have done as well if we hadn't taken this approach with it. Sometimes I will say too, with this particular example, it kind of picks up momentum because some publications in a space will watch what others are doing and then they'll want to publish it too. So that can happen. And in this case, I think that there was a little bit of that too. Next slide, please. The third company that I want to use as an example is Grody Company. They're a manufacturing company. This is a thought leadership example. Next slide. I interviewed their CEO, as I often do, and I ghost wrote a piece talking about upcoming trends for the new year. We published it on their blog, which was great, of course. They're very happy about that. But then I thought, isn't there more we can do with this? So I pitched it to one of their leading trade publications. Next slide. And it showed up in Food Industry Executive. They were happy to publish it. It got another piece of coverage because it was the most read article that month, and they published their top 5 articles. So there you'll see that piece of coverage. And then another editor at a different publication saw it and asked if they could publish it too. So we did rework it a little bit. I never like to send the exact same piece to 2 publications in the same, related space. So we just reworked it a little bit and sent it, and we got yet another piece of coverage. So there was an example where it would have probably just sat on their blog. Some people would have seen it, but we ended up getting it in front of more people in the form of those three pieces of coverage. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, so that's what I just covered, turning your own media into earned media. And then of course you can share it on social, and if you wanted to boost it as paid, you could do that as well. Next, please. So now that we've looked at a couple examples, let's look at how we can reach out to journalists and publications to pitch the content and really help it get more visibility. Next slide. Of course, we have to work with journalists to do this, right? And that could be good news, could be maybe not so good news. Let's look at the next slide. The problem is that more people are pitching the journalists, and there are fewer journalists than ever because journalists, in case you missed this news, they are getting laid off in big numbers, and entire publications are shuttering. Meanwhile, we have not only people in PR pitching journalists, but we have people like link builders pitching journalists. And this all amounts to them getting pummeled with pitches. Next slide. And they get very frustrated, right? And they're probably going to just start tuning out even relevant pitches like what we would hopefully be sending to them about these pieces of contributed content. So what can we do? Next slide. Um, and from their perspective, I think we have to empathize with them a little bit. It's not only too many pitches, but it's just off target pitches. They receive so many pitches that aren't relevant to what they're covering. And what has happened is that sometimes, and I won't say it's only agencies, but many times agencies are guilty of pulling a media list from a database and just spamming out a pitch hundreds of journalists and not doing really probably very much research other than just saying, oh, I want it to go to technology reporters. Well, how many technology reporters are there? There's probably going to be a little subset in there that's going to be the right subset you need, but it doesn't need to go to every single reporter that covers technology. Next slide. So the question becomes then, how do we get this content in front of journalists without spamming them? Because we don't want to add to the spam in their mailbox. I think beyond just, it's not effective, it's rude. I mean, and it's kind of common sense, really. So next slide. So instead of spamming them, let's stop for a minute. Let's think through what we want to accomplish when we pitch. And instead of just sending it out willy-nilly, let's do a little bit of research on the right publication and the right contact at that publication. It's very easy to do research online. If you go to the publication's website, they have a masthead. They usually have guidelines for contributing content on there. The better you can stick to those, the closer you can follow those, the more likely they may be to respond to you and maybe even accept what you're sending them, or at least let you know that they need something that you didn't include or something like that. So just choosing the best media outlet, researching the content, the best contact, and then crafting a compelling pitch and following up. It seems pretty simple. Next slide. Because really more pitches do not result in more media coverage. If that were the case, then all these people who are spamming the journalists would be winning, right? They would have thousands of stories out there, and it just doesn't work that way because journalists really they're busy and they're just again they're getting pummeled and they're not going to respond if it isn't a good fit. So this is something I just get blue in the face talking about, but I will continue to talk about it because we don't want to spam journalists. Next slide. One of the first places you can start when you're thinking about where you do want to pitch it is where does your audience spend time, which is always a question for every marketer and probably every situation that we face is let's think about what makes the most sense as far as where we want to pitch, our or where we want to target our message or whatever we're working on. And in this case, a lot of times it's trade publications. Sure, everybody would love to be in the Wall Street Journal or TechCrunch or whatever the dream publication du jour might be, but the truth of it is your prospects, your customers are looking at trade publications. They're often understaffed, they're looking for content. It makes a great, I'm going to cough, sorry. It makes a great fit for your content and it increases your credibility, helps you reach your target audience. Excuse me. Next slide. So, and beyond that, 63% of journalists say that understanding their target audience is the number one way the PR pros can make their jobs easier. And so you need to think about who their audience is. When you're pitching content, think about who they're writing for. Next slide, please. So here are some more points that are important to keep in mind. Not only understanding their target audience, but if you can provide data, if you can provide expert sources, their subject matter experts, for example, um, you respect their deadlines, don't waste their time, and multimedia assets are ever more important. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that. Next slide. So do make it easy to publish for them. I've had experiences more than once where I sent an email with everything that they needed and they were able to just publish it. They didn't have to come back to me. They didn't have to ask questions. There wasn't anything missing. And so you want to include the piece of content that's well written, that's been edited, proofed, and proofed again. Include your visuals. I'm going to spend a minute talking more in depth about that in just a second. Quote your experts and go ahead and include your links. They may remove some of your links, but I don't think it hurts to put them in there. The one place where I think they won't remove your link is in the author bio. If it's a contributed bylined article, for example, make sure you put a link to your company's website or whatever site you want to draw attention to, whatever URL. Next slide, please. So talking about the visuals, this is often overlooked. Sometimes they don't ask for this. I include it anyway because I think it helps us stand out and it gives us another chance to brand because we can include a caption in there with the name of the company and talk a little bit about the product, solution, whatever it is. So absolutely photos. Do not send stock photos. And I know that sounds funny, but I've had it happen before. I asked for photos, stock photos. So please don't do that. Your high resolution, if you're doing them on your phone, taking them on your phone, there's a way to save them into high resolution, save them as the highest resolution possible. And then you can use those, or if you have the ability to hire a professional photographer or videographer, that's great too. Video, sometimes that's great for trade publications. I've had that work really well. We don't always have that. If we have it, why not include a link to it? And when I say headshots, I mean up-to-date headshots. So you want it to look like the person that's actually contributing the piece. I'd say every 2 or 3 years, you should probably be updating people's headshots. A great way to do it is just hire a professional photographer, have them come into your office, tell everybody, on Wednesday, the 22nd or whatever, we're all getting our headshots taken. Please dress accordingly. And it's all on the same background. It looks really nice. It's very professional. You can put them on your website. You can use them for speaking submissions, use them for contributed article bylines and things like that. So you'll use it more than you think. And I don't think it's that expensive to do that. And if it's something that you're able to put in your budget, I think it's well worth considering. Next slide. So if you give journalists what they need, they're going to trust you and potentially come back to you in the future when they need a source for another story they're working on. If you don't treat it as a one-off and you're really looking at it as trying to be a good resource for them, they're going to appreciate that. They're going to remember that. And it could turn into more opportunities. They could need someone to interview for another story they're working on. We had an editor come to me for one of our clients that said, we're looking for another customer to include. Did you have anyone? We gave them someone. They were in the story. The editor really appreciated that. So it's not that hard to do that, but it does just kind of differentiate you yet a little bit more. Next slide. These are some quick pitching tips. These are not set in stone by any means. This is just what journalists say they prefer. And this is kind of what I follow too. I avoid pitching on Monday, especially Monday morning. If it's a holiday weekend, I don't pitch on Tuesday morning because that's the same difference as Monday. I usually pitch toward the end of the week. Email is preferred. I have done pitching via DMs. That can work. I think most journalists would prefer email. And it's okay to follow up. I think I've heard some people say that you shouldn't follow up. And then I've also seen people go way overboard. Like they'll send a pitch at 10 in the morning, then they'll follow up at 2 p.m. and they'll follow up the next morning and the next day. That will drive them crazy, right? Drive a journalist crazy. So that's just common sense. But I hope that these are just some kind of reminder tips of things to help you get a little further with your pitching. Next slide. So you've secured the earned media coverage. Now what, right? It's just, you're done, right? You can quit. You can go home for the day, right? No. Next slide. Once your content is published, you should be promoting it, right? The PR does not end. You want to get it out there as much as possible because again, like if it's out there and nobody knows about it, does it really make a difference? So you really want people to see that. You want to post on social media. I think it's good manners to tag the media outlet and the journalist. They'll see that. They'll probably appreciate that. It'll probably be a little reminder to them that, oh, this company, you know, was like recognized us for doing this story about them. And that's got to be a positive thing. I can't see that it would ever be considered a negative. Include it in your newsletter if you have one, post it on your press or news area on your website, and you really should have one if you don't. There's other things you could put in there too, like a media contact, any like logos or just a background or press releases, things like that. We could talk all day about that, but I won't right now. And then share with your teams internally, with your sales prospects, investors, and partners. Just make sure that everybody that should see it does see it. Next slide. Tracking your earned media wins measurement is always on people's minds. You want to look at what impact it had, but sometimes that's a little hard with PR because it ladders up usually to something, a bigger marketing campaign or initiative. There are intangible benefits to PR. It can boost morale at a company. It can help your recruiting efforts. Of course, our reputation is more important than it's ever been. And so you can build your reputation, build your credibility, look like the thought leader in your space. It positions you in that way. And it can lead to other opportunities to speak at events, to contribute to other articles, to write contributed articles for publications, to be quoted in roundups. And it just, you never know because sometimes these things do pick up momentum once you get started. And that's really where the magic happens. So next slide. I just want to bring this up again in my brain. This lives in my brain, and I think about this when I'm trying to approach, how I want to work with clients on this, because you really need to have some content to make the earned media approach work. So you really want to spend some time getting that content developed, and then once you start doing that, you'll see things that stand out to you, that pieces that might be good for this approach. Next slide. I'm going to just talk quickly. I'm not saying you need to have a whole bunch of technology and tools. I think sometimes we get a little too focused on the technology piece, because we can really do a lot of this without anything other than just searching online and looking at websites, looking at social media and things. But I will bring up a couple that I like. Coverage Book helps you display your media coverage. There are some metrics that they include in there. That is a paid tool. My clients love that when I send them a coverage book report. Spark Toro is a course Rand Fishkin's company. It helps you do research, find out where your audiences are spending time. Maybe you'll find something that you didn't know in there. I talked about media databases. I'd be really careful with this, especially I work with a lot of smaller companies, 500 employees or less, maybe a one-person marketing department. They don't have a huge budget. These media databases are very expensive. They can be overkill. They're outdated often. You can do your own research online. You don't need a media list of 500 contacts. You need a media list of about 20, 25 contacts, maybe. And then you can look those up. That information is more up to date if you look at a company's website or look at a reporter's social media profile. They're going to keep that updated much more frequently than a database can or would. There is a free database that covers local regional media if you're interested in that, called Mondo Times. You can go in there and see, like, okay, in Boulder, Colorado, these are the newspapers, television stations, blah, blah, blah. It's pretty nice for that. And you can build your own list that way. And then TalkWalker alerts pick up things that Google Alerts may miss. So those are free. I know TalkWalker was just acquired, so I'm kind of keeping an eye to see if those are continued to be free or not, because I've relied on those for a long time. Next. So a few realities. This is not an overnight solution in any way, shape, or form. If you're in a hurry, I always advise you're probably going to have to do paid media, right? Buy an ad, do a sponsored piece, whatever that might look like for you. It takes time to build the relationships and put effort into this and thought. Of course, you don't have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to your content. You probably have some content that falls in one of these categories. or you probably could create some. And once you start doing it, things will start to stand out to you as things that might be a good fit for this. And then I would just encourage your content and PR and probably social media teams to work together so that they're not siloed off, because you just get so much more when you're collaborating and making sure everybody's doing their part. Next slide. Because we know that when we work together to create newsworthy content and understand how to package and pitch it, we get a win for both content and PR. And that is it. Thank you. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Let's see. You can feel free to unmute if you want to ask a question or use the chat. I think a little birdie told me Rich Schwerin might have a question.
I've got a couple, but I do want to give others a chance just because I'm the co-organizer with my canned questions, but they're not canned. I came up with them during the presentation. So anybody else want to jump in? Don't be shy. If not, I'll go. So I three things. First of all, thank you, Michelle. My three questions are around thought leadership, knowing your audience, and images. With thought leadership, give me a little more color. How do you define thought leadership? What are some of the criteria and hallmark that make thought leadership really good?
Right, because everybody thinks they're a thought leader, right? And they're not all possibly, they can't all possibly be.
Right.
I mean, a lot of the companies that I work with in this way have been around a long time. So, you know, Grody Company, the example I use, 50 years they've been around. The CEO's been there probably 20 years. So he is well known in his space and he knows what I mean, people believe that he knows what he's talking about, right? So I'm not saying you have to have that, but for a startup with a young founder to say, I'm a thought leader in my space, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think you just have to have something under your belt to show that you're credible in your space, because I do think we have a lot of people who claim now to be thought leaders. They'll just call themselves a thought leader, influencer, whatever. And that's not the case. So I would
Yeah.
be really careful about who you pick for that.
Well, there's
kind
a
of
fine line between thought leadership and content just propaganda, right? Such that we should be answering the imperative topics of interest for our audience, you know, their keep awakes from a point of view backed by data. And
Yeah.
oftentimes, right, having a provocative point of view that's not just somebody's opinion, but no, we have data that led us this opinion and
Right.
not be selling. So it was great to see your success slide up front on how you've placed some good TL pieces with media. With know your audience, my second question, you mentioned Sparktorial. I'm so glad you did. If anyone on the call hasn't seen it, full confession, I'm a big Rand fanboy, and his CMO, Amanda Natividad, is just genius. Go read their blog, if nothing else, because not everybody can afford some of the other tools like Cision and whatnot. And I'll land on a question around images. And I agree with you. Don't give stock photos. I mean, unless you're really helping the pub and they're free for use, commercial use, right? Do you also include alt text for both accessibility and SEO?
That's a good question. I haven't really done that, but maybe I
Okay.
should be.
It might be overkill. I mean, I think given the Google API leak and a lot of the disruption with SEO, not only with SGE, but with the realities of how Google search actually works. Again, Rand has some great pieces on that. I was just thinking it might help for SEO. It certainly helps for accessibility. Some websites are mandated through WC3 compliance to have alt text. But anyway, great presentation, and I look forward to reading your book.
Thank you so much, Rich.
I had a question, Michelle. You mentioned at the front, don't use AI to create content, like the entire content, and I agree with that. To what extent, if any, are you using AI in your work?
Not very much.
Okay, that's a fine answer. Totally fine.
I use tools that use it. So Grammarly, I use Grammarly, I use AI. I use Gmail, you know, Google. I have Google Suite, G Suite, or whatever they're calling it, but they have AI in there. Sometimes they'll suggest, you know, finish your sentence this way or whatever. But I just don't see a need for it. I think that's always
Okay.
been my position on it. I'm not sitting here going, gosh, I really wish I had somebody to think through this for me. I want to think through it because that's the work. I mean, that to me is the work, and that's what I bring to the table, the value. And then also just I sign NDAs a lot of times, and I can't be
Right.
feeding proprietary content into, I mean, I don't know. I guess I need to stay open-minded, but
Got it. Other questions? Todd, do you have a question?
Nothing pressing. I kind of communicate with Michelle kind of off and on fairly regularly. And I have brought her in to help with the client, and it was awesome. Well, going back to Rand's company, is that his product, Sparktoro, is it pretty accessible for a small business to use? And is this something you can subscribe to for a month and get the information, or is it something that's better to subscribe to long term?
they'll give you some freebies every month.
Yep.
And then,
Okay.
so they'll show you part of a list, and then if you want to see more, you have to pay. They did just raise their prices not too long ago, but I don't think it's crazy expensive. Definitely not as much as some tools, just like the coverage book tool I was talking about. That's like $100 a month. And you
Yeah.
can suspend that and come back to it. So I use it heavily some months, and other months I just keep it on, like, down
And I'm
down
not
on
a
the,
shill. I'm not a shill. I'm not being paid by Rand, but
yeah.
they have a personal monthly thing. It's $38 a month. You're probably spending more at Pete's Coffee, so check it out.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Michelle, I had another question on pitching reporters.
Yeah.
So I think we're now starting to see a shift, possibly a shift in generations where we now have younger generations entering the media as reporters.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm Gen X and I grew up with email, so I always use email. But I think Gen Z, my daughter's Gen Z, I don't think they use email as much. And maybe have you adjusted your pitching if you know the approximate generation of the reporter, because maybe you want to like slide into the DMs of some reporters? Or do you just stick with one communications vehicle?
I'll tell you a couple things. Okay, so
Okay.
one is when they survey reporters, which Muck Rack does every year, overwhelmingly the reporters, and I'm assuming they survey every age. haven't dug into looked under the hood there, but they say email is their number one, and they might say that because it's easy for them to ignore it if they don't want to, because they don't want 100 people like DMing them on Instagram or something. That might be part of the strategy behind that. But there's other times, like, okay, so a lot of reporters have been active on Twitter over the years, and of course I have mixed feelings about it, but I'm still there because reporters are still there. Now, one time they used to be able to have open DMs. So even if you didn't follow each other, they could open their DMs. And I don't know if that still works that way. But one time I pitched a reporter via DM on there and got scolded for not sending it via email. So then I was like, okay, I mean, but on LinkedIn, I have done it a few times, and they'll respond. So, I mean, I think in that way, at least to me, if I get a response at all, that's some level of success. I mean, even if it's not a yes, at least they acknowledge they saw it, and so that means something to me. Maybe not always to the client, but yeah.
I have another question if I haven't gone over quota. So Michelle, kind of a meta question, and
Yeah.
not Facebook, but meta in the sense of
Yeah.
how have you, as a new author with your new book,
Yeah.
used your own best practices to, get some love for the book?
Yeah, I have to do my own PR, right? I mean, I don't have to.
Yeah.
There are people out there who'll charge you any number of thousands of dollars to do it
Give
for
yourself
you.
a pro bono rate. Do this one for free. But are you? My question is: are you using something you talked to us
Oh,
about to
yeah.
get your book out there?
Absolutely. Oh, for sure I am. Yeah. And another book that I love is Mark Schaefer's Known. I don't know if everybody's familiar with that book, but I have that book. And that's another book that I've used to help me think about how to market myself. And, he says your blog writes a book. And so to me, that was one of the things that I thought about, because I had written so many articles for my blog and contributed articles for publications over the years. And so kind of that all culminated in the book. And then as far as like, I think the biggest thing about promoting the book is that I've built my audience before I published the book. And of course I didn't start building the audience thinking I'm going to write a book and tout the book, like I didn't do it that way, but I do have a following because I have been out there for a long time. And so when this idea, I mean, this all started a few years ago, like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. Then I was like, okay, yeah, this will be really helpful because I don't really, I mean, I certainly self-promote about my work and what I write and all that online, but I don't ask a lot of my audience. Like I don't try to sell or push or, so in this case, I've been pretty out there about promoting the book because I feel like, okay, if I could ever call on my audience for support, this is the time, right? So I think to me, that's been the biggest and best, most helpful tip I would say would help anybody with anything they're trying to promote.
Cool. Thanks. And
All right,
thanks
and
for
let's-
shout out to Mark's book. I put a link in there. Dennis, did we have Mark as a guest?
We have not had Mark as a guest. We need
Okay,
to pitch
gotta-
him.
Well, I think Michelle knows him, so maybe she can refer him.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks, Michelle.
All right. Speaking of the books, let's give some books away. So stay on. I'm gonna close for the recording, and then we'll give the books away. So Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today. And remind us, what's your website if people want to check out your business?
Yeah, it's michellegarrett.com. So it's 2 L's, 2 R's, 2 T's. And then there's a page all about the book there. The book's available, anywhere you would buy a book. So
All right. Thanks so much.
thank you.